Welcome to another comparison video. Today, we'll see how much the PlayStation 5 Pro console improves the performance of a bunch of different PlayStation 5 games. I've really been looking forward to running these comparisons, and although Sony promises the PS5 Pro will bring with it many different types of visual improvements, I'm going to focus here on just one of them, frame rate. Having said that, I anticipate we'll see some of these other visual improvements in the comparison footage that I'll be showing you as we go along. So this is not a deep dive analysis of one game. I've analysed just one or two scenes for a bunch of different types of games, which when we put together should give a good summary of FPS improvements of the PlayStation 5 Pro at launch. Righto, on to the comparisons. The first game we'll look at is Hogwarts Legacy. Hogwarts Legacy has a few visual modes, as you can see here. Each visual mode has its own visual settings. The first 4 modes on this list can also be run uncapped, which means they run at the same visual quality as normal, but the console will run the game as fast as it possibly can with those visual settings. The high frame rate performance mode is always uncapped. Uncapping the frame rate can definitely increase the FPS above the target FPS, but the downside is frame rate can go up and down quite quickly, which some people will find distracting. This is why FPS is capped by default in most modes, in most games for that matter. However, it is great this option is available so the player can decide how they want to run the game. Uncapped frame rate is also really useful for me. It really helps with these FPS comparison videos.
Sometimes it seems all roads lead to Hogsmeade.
To measure frame rate, I ran through Hogsmeade during the day. So with FPS uncapped, I recorded these results on the standard PlayStation 5. Fidelity mode hit 38 frames a second, as did fidelity mode with ray tracing enabled. Balanced mode was a bit higher at 43 frames a second, and performance mode uncapped hit 65, which is different from high frame rate performance mode, which went all the way up to 86 frames a second. Avalanche Games, the developers of Hogwarts Legacy, has stated that the game will run at high resolution in all visual modes on the Pro thanks to PSSR. They also noted that Fidelity Ray Tracing mode has been revamped and that there are new visual reflections and ray traced shadows present in all environments. So that means there's no mention by Avalanche of improved frame rates, and this matches the results I found, where Hogwarts Legacy runs on the PS5 Pro at very similar frame rates to the standard PS5. The only exception I found was Fidelity mode, which jumped from about 38 frames per second on average on the PS5 when uncapped, up to 50 during my run through of Hogsmeade. This result puts it in the same FPS range as the balanced modes, which is impressive. I ran this test a couple of times to confirm this result too. Overall then, the major benefit of running Hogwarts Legacy on the PS5 Pro is improved resolution and visuals, with a single exception being quality mode, which seems to run at about 10 frames per second higher on the Pro. This makes quality mode an attractive option to play the game in over in the balanced mode, as it provides reasonably high FPS and shows the game at its non-ray traced best. Next is Elden Ring. Elden Ring is an interesting title in that it does not have a locked frame rate. In normal play, it sits at about 45 frames per second, which has led some to say that perhaps it should have an FPS cap. I grabbed a cheap second-hand copy of this game, but confess I have not played very much of it, so what you're seeing now is just the first large open area, and I appreciate this may not be indicative of some of the more complex environments in the game, but I'll use the same setting for all comparisons. And just to show FPS in action, here's footage of me taking some hits. I didn't have a controller in my hand when this dude showed up. I was saving some game footage, so I was a bit disoriented, a bit unprepared. I guess I had sense enough to press the record button though, but there you go, that's the frame rate when you're getting smashed. Elden Ring has 3 modes. It has a quality mode, it has a quality ray tracing mode, and it has a performance mode. Both quality modes don't have a target FPS cap. Performance mode has a 60 FPS cap. Performance mode showed a large amount of variation, with an average uncapped FPS of 56 for both quality and quality ray tracing modes. Uncapped FPS was 45 or 46. Onto the PlayStation 5 Pro results. In the short test I ran, performance mode and quality mode with ray tracing enabled both return results similar to Elden Ring running just on the standard PlayStation 5. However, quality mode without ray tracing showed a noticeable improvement up to 60 frames a second at times. As such, this impressive performance in quality mode may make the performance mode redundant when playing Elden Ring on the Pro. To my knowledge, Elden Ring has not received an official PS5 Pro patch, so the FPS improvements we see in quality mode here is purely a result of the increased speed and performance of the Pro's new GPU and faster RAM. In summary then, quality mode without ray tracing is improved definitely over the base PS5. Alright, and if you're enjoying this video, a thumbs up, a like would be very greatly appreciated. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, check out my channel and see the kind of videos I make. Feel free to subscribe, that'd be great. Resident Evil 4 is an odd game in that its two main visual modes, resolution and frame rate mode, both have a 60 FPS cap. The difference is, of course, to be found in other visual features. RE4 also includes the option to enable ray tracing mode, which means there are 4 visual modes. I just assessed two activities. One was combat outside the church, and one was a walk and or combat through the nearby graveyard. Capcom have stated that Resident Evil on the PS5 Pro will have both higher frame rate and improved resolution. The first thing you may notice looking at these video settings is the new high frame rate toggle, which is not present on the standard PS5, and this is the result. With the high frame rate toggle on, frame rate sat above 60 FPS in resolution and frame rate modes. And this was true even if ray tracing was turned on. One thing to note is that frame rate did move up and down a lot, especially during combat, which may not be what everyone wants. The only way to achieve a consistent frame rate is to turn the high frame rate mode off, and the game should run at a clean 60 FPS.
Give me a warning next time?
Star Wars Outlaws is next. Star Wars Outlaws is a straightforward 30 FPS quality mode and a 60 FPS performance mode, and in the middle there is a 40 FPS favor quality mode for those of you with 120Hz TVs. And that's how I usually play it. Interestingly, Mark Cerny from Sony mentioned that about 25% of people who use the PlayStation 5 have 120Hz TVs or monitors. I thought that was an interesting statistic. I tested frame rate doing a long full-speed ride overland onto Shara, and this has been known to generate FPS dips at times. As you can see, Outlaws sticks hard to its 30 FPS cap in quality mode. In favor quality mode, it maintains 40 FPS quite well. The only wobbles in the FPS graph I saw were in performance mode. Depending on what you're doing in the game, it'll likely spend most of its time at 60 FPS. It only display drops down to the low 50s during fast traversal with complex terrain. Let's see if the PlayStation 5 Pro can iron out those few bumps in the 60 FPS performance mode. So this is interesting. Star Wars Outlaws on the PlayStation 5 Pro. Instead of having 3 visual modes to choose from, we now just have 1. This mode is designed to use the highest visual quality that we find in the standard PS5 quality mode, but it runs it at 60 frames a second using PSSR. So here's a side-by-side of PS5 in 60 FPS performance mode compared to the PS5 Pro's only mode, which is also 60 FPS. Just note, of course, the differences here are all about visuals, but the game footage I captured was really to look at frame rate. So the footage I captured for Outlaws may not be the best to compare visual fidelity differences, as I was focusing on frame rate. The video footage I've captured is lossless footage, but it is only at 1080p, but hopefully you can see some differences. God of War Ragnarok. This is just a quick look at God of War Ragnarok. This game has a high frame rate performance mode on the standard PlayStation 5. In this quick test, you can see Kratos charging around at about 84 frames per second on the standard PS5 in high frame rate performance mode. The PS5 Pro patch brought with it 2 additional graphic settings. The first is a PS5 Pro Enhanced mode. The second is a scaling toggle. You can now choose between temporal anti-aliasing or the PlayStation's own PSSR anti-aliasing. When enabling PS5 Pro Enhanced mode and PSSR anti-aliasing, frame rate sat at about 80 frames a second during this run around. When keeping the PS5 Pro Enhanced mode on and instead selecting temporal anti-aliasing, the FPS varied from a dip of 85, looking at the reflection in the puddle, up to about 95 when stationary. As mentioned, all the footage in this video was chosen to assess frame rate. However, God of War Ragnarok and most of the other games in this video have improvements in resolution and visual quality which may not be obvious from what I'm showing. TLDR, frame rate is only part of the story. PS5 Pro improvements go way beyond FPS. For some games, FPS is actually unchanged, but there are certainly visual improvements. But a look at those visual changes must wait for another video. There are a couple of games I did plan to include in this comparison, but they ended up performing really well on the standard PlayStation 5. So as far as frame rate goes, we won't see any improvements with the Pro. The first of these games is Horizon Forbidden West. Guerrilla Games have stated the PS5 Pro has allowed them to push graphical fidelity, so the new 60 FPS performance mode will look at least as good as the current FPS quality mode on the standard PlayStation 5. And that sounds good. The other game was, surprisingly, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. It certainly has a history of performance and visual issues upon release, but try as I might, with the latest patches I could not get the game to dip below 60 FPS in performance mode on the standard PlayStation 5 whilst I was running around Kobo. Respawn Entertainment have stated that Jedi Survivor's new PS5 Pro performance mode will run at 60 FPS, but at a higher resolution than it does currently, and with the addition of ray traced reflections and ambient occlusion, which will be interesting to see. Bit of background on the PlayStation 5 Pro console. From various Sony press releases, videos, and interviews, we know the CPU inside the PS5 Pro is the same as the standard PlayStation 5, and that the storage speeds are the same, though there is more storage out of the box with the new console, now up to 2 terabytes, up from less than 1 terabyte on the standard model. Sony says the Pro's GPU has 67% more computing cores and RAM is also faster, which together results in image rendering speeds increasing by up to 45%, which sounds good on paper, and I am very keen to see how that will translate in actual games. The Pro includes new hardware not present on the standard PS5. It includes a dedicated AI-assisted upscaling called PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, PSSR. PSSR is a dedicated means to improve resolution. I do wonder if offloading these upscaling duties to the PSSR system will free up resources to increase overall frame rate. I guess it will depend on the game, and here's hoping. I'll keep an eye out. Sony also said that PSSR support will work with all games, but a patch will be needed to enable it for each one. Sony are also promoting more ray tracing in more games with new ray tracing implementation via an AMD technology that isn't yet present in PC graphics cards. So that should be interesting to see. According to Sony, it's been very well received by developers. The PS5 Pro console also has a game boost mode, which allows the console to improve the frame rate of PlayStation 4 games when played on the PlayStation 5. That will be worth a video in itself. Alright, I hope you enjoyed what I've shown you. A like would be very greatly appreciated. Feel free to subscribe, that'd be great. Alright, cheers. Ramnix is out.